Welcome to season 2 of the Fantasy Formula One podcast. I'm Paul, and we're kicking off this season talking about some technical topics that we hear a lot about in the Formula One world and how they pertain to the fantasy Formula One world. The first one is high downforce versus low downforce tracks and car setups and things like that. This is something that as you watch F1, you will hear them say constantly. And some of it's intuitive, but for me, some of it wasn't. So I want to kind of explain my understanding, give some examples so you can, make accurate decisions when you hear, oh, this is a high downforce track or this is a low downforce car setup. We know what they're talking about. So high downforce tracks favor aerodynamics over top end or engine speed. They make the tracks more technical, and it decreases just the super speedway NASCAR sort of go aspect of racing. And when you think of a Formula One car, a way to look at it when it comes to high downforce, low downforce is it's like an inverted plane. So where a aircraft or in aviation, the wings, the whole thing is designed to generate lift on the plane. And then when you want to land, you increase flaps, you decrease speed, you adjust your attitude, you do things to disrupt the lift over the aircraft, including decreased speed, and you lose lift and you eventually land. Well, in Formula One specifically, is the exact opposite of that, where all of the aerodynamics on the car are designed to make the car push down onto the track. They're designed to make the car sticky, make it so the air, part of the air that goes past the car pushes the car down. And the reason why is, one, these engines are so powerful, these power units are so powerful, they can force their way through the air and still race very fast with all that downforce. But the second part is when it comes to turning, and I'm going to go through all this in granular detail, but big, wide brushstrokes is when we turn in our everyday car, we have to slow down a lot, and they call it a 90-degree turn, right? We have to turn at a very slow speed. Otherwise, the cars slide, the cars sway, and we end up losing control and sliding off the road or flipping or something like that. Well, with Formula One cars specifically, they want all that downforce so that when they, among tires and other things, so that when they do take the turn, they can take the turn at a sharp turn at very high speed, and all of that relatively speaking, very high speed. And all of that downforce is pushing the car to the ground, so they're able to make that tight, sticky turn. And the trade-off is that the driver feels, up to 5 lateral G-forces in the cockpit. So that is the reason why downforce is a big thing with Formula One. So you can carry a lot of speed in the turns, and the trade-off is that in the straightaways and stuff like that. So, all right, we're going to dive into it. That's the overview. Here's where we're going to dive into it. High downforce tracks. Straight line speed is lower on low downforce tracks due to the drag from high downforce wings and bodywork. So again, in aviation, you can't generate lift without generating drag, and I'm not going to dive into all that now. But basically, the faster you go, the more the air tries to slow you down, and so straight line speed is overall lower. Top speeds are also lower, but accelerations out of corners are faster because of the improved traction. So we think of it as they can sprint really fast on high downforce tracks. They can sprint really fast, but they don't get up to as high a top end speed because the straightaways are narrow and you don't need that top end speed. You don't have the time to make it to that top end speed, so we don't worry about it, unlike like drag racers where they don't care about turning, they just care about being able to go in a straight line. The drag reduction system, or the DRS, is more impactful on these tracks because it reduces the downforce on the straights. And again, I'm going to have a whole nother talk on DRS and what that does, so go ahead and tune into that one. The cornering speed. Cornering speed is very high, as I mentioned, due to the extra aerodynamic grip. That stickiness, that wind pushing down on the car, means that they can turn have a higher cornering speed, and the cars can take the corners at the speed without losing control, because the downforce pushes the car onto a track, especially through fast sweeping turns where you don't have to almost come to a stop in order to turn. But that does lead to tire degradation. So there on these high downforce tracks, there's a higher tire wear due to the more lateral forces in the corners. As soon as you make that big sweeping turn really fast and there's all that sticky, there has to be the tires meet the road at some point, and there has to be something preventing the car from sliding. Yes, first off, you're pushing down on the car more, but it's also the tires. The tires are where that grip occurs. And so the tires, and we'll have a whole nother talk on tires, but that damages the tires more because the tires have to grip the ground more, the track more. The front tires tend to take more punishment on tracks with high speed turns, because as soon as you turn one way or the other, and as soon as you brake at all, your center of gravity shifts forward and shifts to the outside tire. So the front outside tire of every turn takes more punishment. So if you have a track that has a lot of turns one direction, that front outboard tire will get damaged faster. And then you have braking performance. Shorter braking, the high downforce tracks have shorter braking distances because the high downforce allows the drivers to brake later. As soon as, if you think about it, if you're if you're running into the wind and there's 20 miles an hour wind coming at you, and or there's no wind coming at you, if you're running and then you go to slow down, the wind hitting you in the face will slow you down quite a bit. Think of it like that, except you're also holding a wing and that wind is pushing you down. So it acts twice as much. And then the cars stay more stable under braking, and it reduces the chance of lockups, which is good, but there's another part of that, and we'll get to that in a minute. So engine and fuel efficiency. These cars on these high downforce tracks do burn more fuel, since they stay on the throttle longer due to the increased grip, and they don't need to lose, and then they can stay on the throttle longer, and then they hit the brake to slow down, then they have to gain all that speed back. They do require higher power. They do burn more gas because the higher drag increases the fuel usage. And another way to look at this is that all the wind that's coming past them isn't just missing them now, it's hitting a wing that is pushing their car down, so they have to push their way through that wind. And then power unit cooling is a major concern due to the restricted airflow around the tightly packed bodywork and stuff. And a way to look at that is some like GoPro cameras have this feature, but as soon as you have something warm and you blow a lot of wind over it, you're going very hot, you're going very fast, which is what happens in a low downforce track. It cools off the engine naturally, whereas as soon as you're going slower, you have more of that stagnant air, and that the aerodynamics are used to push the car down, so you don't have as much breathing room around the engine. Examples of high downforce tracks are Monaco, Hungary, Singapore, Suzuka, and Zandvoort. And those all have tight corners, twisty corners. They have heavy braking zones. And like, for example, Monaco is extremely tight and twisty with, not a lot of straight line speed, not a lot of passing. And then Hungary is often called Monaco without walls. And it has a lot of slower corners where your cars almost come to a stop and have to turn a lot. So now moving on to low downforce track characteristics. It's pretty much the exact opposite of the high downforce. Low downforce tracks prioritize the straight line speed over cornering grip. And this is why, and the reason for this is they have to balance out how much time they lose on long straightaways versus how much time they lose in the turns. As soon as we have an imaginary track, right, an oval with 2 mile-long straightaways and very sharp, narrow turns to another mile-long straightaway, for example, I'm going to build my car so I can get as much speed as possible on that mile-long straightaway, and then have heavy braking right at the end, spend as little bit of time as I can doing that quick hairpin turn, and then just hit the gas and drive that mile. Now, imagine it's the exact same track, only each straightaway is, half a kilometer is, and these are not the right ratios, like 1/10 of a mile. just a city block. Well, then I'm going to come out of that turn and I'm going to romp on the gas, but I'm not going to be on the gas very long before I have to hit the brakes for that next turn. And then as soon as that happens, I want to be able to take that. I'm better off taking that turn as fast as possible and sacrificing that high-end speed because I'm never going to go that fast. So on these low downforce tracks, they prioritize that hop-end speed, making the car bullet-like and maximizing that engine performance. So straight line speed is much, much, much higher on these than on high downforce tracks due to the reduced aerodynamic grip and the more harnessing that engine, because now they're staying out of the wind and they don't have all that wind forcing them down, and so you don't have to drive through it. Top speeds can be over 215, 220 miles an hour, or I think the official number is 350 kilometers per hour. And DRS is less effective since the cars already have minimal drag, and it makes the speed difference smaller when it's activated. And it also, a way to look at it is, as soon as we both have a long time to build up that speed, then we'll eventually both kind of top out at around the same range, and the DRS is just less effective. But tune into that DRS talk. For cornering speed is a lot lower on these high downforce tracks because the cars generate less aerodynamic grip, and so they can't go as fast without sliding or risk losing control. There's more reliance on the mechanical grip, so the tires and the suspension, rather than on the aerodynamics. And the braking zones are longer because since there is so much less grip and there's not as much aerodynamics pushing down on the car, we need to use the brakes to slow them down more, and then that generates heat, and you have to have time and space to do that. Understeer is more common, but I won't go into that now. I'll do a separate. I'll refer you to that separate understeer oversteer conversation. Tire wear and degradation is lower overall tire wear due to decreased lateral forces in the corner. The rear tires may suffer more because drivers need good traction out of slow speed corners to go into the long straight. So as soon as they come out of a slow speed corner, they're applying as much power to those rear tires as they can without slipping them, and that will increase the rear tire degradation. And also more sliding can occur, which leads to uneven wear, which again, refer you to the tire wear conversation. For as far as braking performance, we already mentioned that there's longer braking distances since there's less downforce helping the car slow down, but lockups and instability are also more common because there's that less aerodynamic grip, so the car isn't being pushed on the ground, so it's easier for the tires to basically have the brakes stop the tires altogether since there's not as much ground moving underneath, or there's not as force pushing the tire onto the ground. And I'll touch on it more. I should say, in the tire brief. But basically, as soon as you get a bald spot, well, then that's a section of your tire that's not generating the grip, and it slows you down. For engine fuel and efficiency, the low downforce tracks do tend to be more fuel efficient because the cars spend more time, quote unquote, coasting at high speeds at the higher gears where it's requiring less fuel. The power unit performance is critical, as straight line speed depends heavily on the engine output. And less drag does mean better cooling and reduced chances for overheating. So it's all in all easier on your power unit. And some examples of the low downforce tracks are Monza, the Temple of Speed, Baku, Sapa, Jeddah, Las Vegas. All of these are fast circuits with high-speed corners, with more high-speed corners, and long straightaways. And that's a high downforce and low versus low downforce. I know there's a lot of tracks I didn't miss because some tracks are considered medium downforce, which just means, yeah, they're tracks, they're there. It's not favored one or the other, so it comes down to each individual team and how they want to run it. Well, that is our high downforce versus low downforce discussion. Be sure to check out all our other content and get caught up on all things fantasy Formula One before the teams lock. Cheers.